Welcome back to Zarila HOA Stories. Drop your country or city name in comment. Chapter 1. The Perfect Neighborhood. Sarah stood on the porch of her new home, a sense of pride swelling in her chest as she looked out over the pristine neighborhood. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over the rows of well-manicured lawns, white picket fences, and houses that looked like something out of a magazine. This was it, the dream neighborhood she'd always imagined. Quiet, peaceful, place where she could finally put down root. She had worked hard for this moment. The house was everything she had dreamed of. Spacious, with an open floor plan, a big backyard, and even a little vegetable garden patch. She imagined planting flowers, hanging a few wind chimes, maybe even getting a dog. After years of struggling in crowded city apartments, this was her fresh start. But as she stood there, taking it all in, a familiar weight settled in her chest. The excitement was there, but it was edged with doubt. She couldn't shake the feeling that this picture-perfect neighborhood had an undercurrent, something she wasn't quite seeing yet. Before she could dwell too much on it, a woman appeared on the sidewalk, walking briskly toward her house. The woman wore a crisp blouse, a tailored skirt, and heels that clicked loudly against the pavement. Sarah instinctively straightened up, wiping her hands on her jeans as she prepared to greet her first neighbor. The woman reached the porch, and without so much as a smile, she extended her hand. "You must be Sarah," she said in a clipped tone. Her eyes were cold, as if she was sizing Sarah up. "That's me," Sarah replied, trying to sound friendly. "I just moved in." "I'm Karen," the woman said, her handshake firm but brief. "I'm the HOA president." She didn't say it like it was a simple introduction. The title felt like a claim to something, like she owned the neighborhood. "Oh, nice to meet you," Sarah said, a little thrown off by the woman's serious demeanor. Karen didn't respond right away. She was looking past Sarah, surveying the front yard. "I just wanted to stop by and give you a packet of HOA rules," she said, pulling a thick stack of papers from her tote bag. "You'll need to follow these regulations to maintain the integrity of our community." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Regulations?" She glanced down at the stack of paper in Karen's hand. It looked like a small novel. "Yes," Karen said, nodding. "There are specific guidelines for everything. Lawn care, house colors, garbage bins, even the way your house is decorated." She paused, as if waiting for Sarah to process the weight of the statement. "We like to keep things uniform around here. It helps maintain property value and makes the neighborhood a pleasant place to live." Sarah's smile faltered. She hadn't anticipated this level of control. "I didn't realize there were so many rules," she said, trying to hide her surprise. "I just wanted to make sure I'm settling in okay." "You'll want to familiarize yourself with the rules," Karen continued, her tone unyielding. "I'll be around if you have any questions." She handed Sarah the packet of papers. "And don't forget to follow them. We have fines for violations. You wouldn't want to get a fine for something simple, like an overgrown lawn, would you?" The word "fines" hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She hadn't expected to feel like she was being scolded for simply living in her new home. It was just a garden, for God's sake. "I'll make sure to go through everything," Sarah said, her voice tight. She forced a smile, trying to brush off the discomfort that was starting to build. "Thanks for stopping by." Karen nodded, her expression neutral. "We like to keep everything in order around here. You'll see, the rules keep the place running smoothly." She gave Sarah one last cold glance before turning on her heel and walking away without another word. Sarah stood on the porch, staring after her, the packet of rules heavy in her hand. She glanced down at the papers, feeling a mix of frustration and disbelief. She didn't want to be bogged down by rules. She wanted freedom, a chance to make her home her own. But now, it seemed, her idea of a perfect neighborhood had just been complicated. She stepped inside the house, dropping the packet on the kitchen counter. The house felt quiet, almost too quiet. The excitement from earlier was beginning to feel distant. She had just moved into her dream home, but now she was already feeling trapped. After a moment of hesitation, she reached for the packet, flipping it open. Her eyes skimmed the first few pages. Rules about lawn care, landscaping, even the color of her mailbox. But then she stopped on a section titled, Personalizing Your Property. One line caught her eye. All exterior changes, including landscaping, must be pre-approved by the HOA to ensure uniformity and aesthetics. The words pre-approved burned in her mind. She wasn't even allowed to plant flowers in her own yard without permission? She slammed the packet shut, frustration boiling inside her. She hadn't moved to this neighborhood to live under someone else's thumb. She had worked too hard for this. For freedom. For a space that was hers. But then a thought struck her, icy and chilling. What if Karen wasn't the only one who had this much control? Suddenly, the house, the neighborhood, even the air around her felt suffocating. Sarah didn't know what she was getting into, but she was starting to feel like she'd walked into a trap. And she wasn't sure if she was going to get out of it. As she stared at the rules in her hands, she made a vow to herself. I'm not going to let some HOA president control my life. But what she didn't realize was that Karen wasn't the only obstacle standing in her way. And as Sarah would soon learn, this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The Overbearing First Encounter. The next morning, Sarah stood at the window, sipping her coffee as the sun slowly bathed the neighborhood in soft light. It felt like a fresh start. A new day, a new life. But the tension from yesterday's encounter with Karen lingered like a shadow, casting doubt on what was supposed to be a peaceful homecoming. She had been so eager to settle into her new home, but now, the rules, those endless pages of HOA regulations, kept flashing in her mind. She didn't even know where to begin. Gardening? Painting? Trash bins? What did she really want out of her new life here? And how much would she have to sacrifice just to fit in? The doorbell rang, snapping her out of her thoughts. She set her coffee cup down and walked to the door, unsure of who it might be. She hadn't even finished unpacking yet. When she opened the door, there stood Tom, the neighbor she had met briefly the day before. He looked like a friendly, regular guy, mid-40s, wearing a pair of jeans and a t-shirt with a faded logo. He had a warm smile, but there was something in his eyes that made Sarah hesitate. "Hey, Sarah, right?" Tom asked, holding up a plate of freshly baked cookies. "I thought I'd bring you a little welcome gift." "That's so kind of you," Sarah said, forcing a smile. She was still shaken by her meeting with Karen and wasn't sure how to feel about getting a visit from another neighbor so soon. Tom grinned, stepping into the house without waiting for an invitation. "Don't worry, I'm not here to lecture you on HOA rules or anything," he said, chuckling. "I know that Karen can be much." Sarah froze. "You know about Karen?" Tom's smile faded, and he glanced around the room nervously before sitting down on the couch. "Oh yeah. She's a force around here, all right. Most people keep their heads down to avoid her. I'm sure you've noticed." Sarah sat down beside him, feeling both relieved and uneasy at the same time. "She gave me a stack of rules when I moved in. There are so many things I'm not even sure I'm allowed to do." Tom sighed. "It's not just the rules. It's the power she has over the board, over everyone. She doesn't just enforce the guidelines, she controls them. People have been fined for the tiniest things. She's built this little kingdom around her." "That sounds insane," Sarah muttered, glancing over at the packet of HOA rules still sitting on the kitchen counter. "It is," Tom agreed. "But it's how she operates. She's been the president for years, and she's made sure no one has challenged her. She's got eyes everywhere. If you don't follow the rules, she'll make you regret it." Sarah felt a wave of frustration rise inside her. "I didn't buy this house to live in some kind of prison. It's my property. I should be able to do what I want with it." Tom looked at her, his expression serious now. "I know. I felt the same way when I moved in. But trust me, Sarah, you don't want to go head-to-head with her. She'll make your life miserable. I've seen it happen." "Why doesn't anyone stop her?" Sarah asked, her voice growing louder, frustration spilling over. This is crazy. People shouldn't be scared of one person like this. I've tried, Tom said quietly. But Karen's got the whole neighborhood wrapped around her finger. She has everyone convinced that if we don't follow the rules exactly, our property values will plummet. It's a lie, but people believe it. Sarah felt a knot tighten in her chest. She had moved here for a fresh start, to escape the chaos of the city, and now it seemed she was walking straight into a nightmare. Does anyone ever stand up to her? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom's eyes flickered with a mix of regret and fear. A few people have, but it doesn't end well. You might get one victory, but she'll find a way to punish you. It's like a game to her, and she always wins. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Was she really going to let Karen push her around like this? Was this what life in this neighborhood would be like? Living under constant fear of the HOA president? I'm not afraid of her, Sarah said firmly. I'm not going to let her take control of my life. I've worked too hard to get here. Tom gave her a look that Sarah couldn't quite place. You say that now, he said softly. But you don't know what you're up against. Trust me, if you cross her, things will get ugly. I'll take my chances, Sarah said, standing up. I didn't buy this house to hide from people like her. Tom stood up too, but not without giving her one last warning glance. Just be careful, Sarah. I'm not saying you can't fight back, but make sure you're ready for the consequences. Sarah nodded, but as she walked him to the door, a chill ran down her spine. Tom's words echoed in her head, but she wasn't about to back down. She wasn't going to let a woman like Karen control her life. Not here. Not now. As she closed the door behind him, Sarah stood there, the weight of the situation settling in. It wasn't just about a garden or a shed anymore. It was about power, control, and the lengths people would go to maintain it. Her hand lingered on the doorknob, and she glanced back toward the window. Across the street, she saw someone standing behind a fence, watching her house. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge her glance. It was almost like they were waiting, watching. Sarah felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Who was that? Was it someone from the HOA keeping an eye on her? Or was it just another neighbor? The figure remained motionless, just staring at her house. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched, unsure of what to do. Should she confront them? Should she even care? The person finally turned and disappeared behind the fence, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Chapter 3. The First Violation. The sun was setting, casting a soft, orange glow over the neighborhood. Sarah stood in her garden, a slight smile on her face as she admired the flowers she had planted just a few days ago. The petals were a riot of color, reds, purples, yellows, just like the dream garden she had envisioned. It was her way of claiming her new home, her space, her fresh start. It made her feel at peace, like she finally belonged. But that peace didn't last long. There was a knock at the door, sharp and urgent. Sarah froze, heart skipping a beat. She had a feeling she knew exactly who it was. She glanced one last time at the garden, its beauty suddenly seeming fragile. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the door and opened it. Standing there was Karen, the HOA president. Her face was unreadable, but the way she stood, straight-backed, hands clasped behind her, told Sarah that this was no casual visit. "Good evening," Karen said, her tone cold. "I see you've made some changes to your garden." She didn't step inside. She just stood there, observing, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, I planted a few flowers," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I thought it would brighten up the place." Karen's lips tightened into a thin line. "I noticed." She glanced over her shoulder as if to check for anyone else. "I've been informed that you didn't submit a landscaping request for approval before making these changes." Sarah's heart sank. Landscaping request? She hadn't heard of such a thing. All she wanted was to make her yard feel like home, but now it seemed she had made a mistake. "I didn't know I needed approval for flowers," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "They're just flowers." Nothing that affects the neighborhood. It's about consistency, Sarah, Karen replied, her voice growing colder. The HOA has strict guidelines to maintain the aesthetic of the community. Every change, no matter how small, needs to be approved in advance. That's how we keep the property values up. She stepped forward, crossing her arms. I'll need you to remove these flowers. Immediately. The words hit Sarah like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She wanted to argue. She wanted to shout. But instead, she took a deep breath and tried to find the words. I don't understand. These are just flowers, Sarah said, her voice wavering. They're not hurting anyone. Karen's eyes flickered with a hint of impatience. It's not about hurting anyone, Sarah. It's about following the rules. She took another step forward, lowering her voice. You've made a mistake, and you need to fix it. I suggest you remove them as soon as possible to avoid a fine. Sarah's mind raced, anger bubbling up inside her. This was her garden, her home. She had the right to plant whatever she wanted. But standing here in front of Karen, she couldn't help but feel a knot tighten in her stomach. The HOA wasn't just about flowers, it was about control, and she was beginning to realize that this was just the beginning. I won't take them down, Sarah said, her voice more firm this time. I won't let you, or anyone, tell me what I can or can't do with my own property. Karen's face hardened, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw something cold flash in her eyes. You think you can ignore the rules and get away with it? The HOA doesn't tolerate disobedience. If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to fine you. And if you keep pushing, there will be more consequences. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She stood her ground, refusing to let fear take hold. I don't care about your fines. This is my home. And I'm not going to let you control me. Karen stared at her for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Then, with a sharp nod, she turned and walked away without saying another word. The sound of her heels clicking on the pavement echoed in Sarah's ears. The door slammed shut behind her, and Sarah stood there, trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Her hands shook as she looked out the window at the garden again. It wasn't just about the flowers. This was about power. And Karen had made it clear that if Sarah didn't fall in line, there would be consequences. But Sarah wasn't going to back down. She refused to let Karen or the HOA control her life. She had worked too hard for this place, and she wasn't about to let it be taken away from her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She pulled it out and saw a message from Tom. Be careful. Karen doesn't give up easily. I've seen her ruin people for less. You're playing with fire. Sarah stared at the message, her heart sinking. She had been warned. And now, it seemed, there was no turning back. Chapter 4. The Secret Behind Karen's Power. The days following Karen's warning felt like a storm cloud hanging over Sarah's head. She couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Her garden, once a symbol of freedom, now seemed like a battleground. Every time she looked at it, she wondered how much longer she could keep it, her garden, before the HOA struck again. The rules, the fines, the threat of punishment, it all felt suffocating. Sarah had tried to keep her head down, hoping Karen would forget about the flowers, but deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. Karen wasn't the type to let anything slide. Her grip on the neighborhood was too tight. One evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, going over the HOA rules again. She felt like she was reading the same pages over and over. Lawn care, landscape regulations, painting guidelines, trash bins. All of it felt so controlling, so rigid. She had bought this house to escape the rules and constraints of city life, but now it seemed like she had traded one kind of cage for another. The doorbell rang. Sarah sighed, knowing exactly who it was. She wasn't ready for another confrontation with Karen, but she had no choice. When she opened the door, it wasn't Karen who stood there. It was Tom. His face was serious, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something urgent. Hey, he said, glancing around quickly. Can I come in for a minute? Of course, Sarah said, stepping aside. Tom walked in, looking like he had something heavy on his mind. Is everything okay? She asked, closing the door behind him. Tom paced for a moment, his eyes darting to the window and then back to Sarah. No, he said quietly. It's not okay. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What's wrong? Tom hesitated, as if weighing whether to share this with her. Then, with a deep breath, he looked Sarah in the eyes. Karen, she's been doing more than just enforcing rules. She's been manipulating things behind the scenes. The HOA is her playground, Sarah. Sarah frowned, confused. What do you mean? I thought she was just, strict about the rules. Tom shook his head. It's not just about the rules. She's been using the HOA to control people, getting them to pay fines for things that don't matter. But there's more to it. She's been siphoning money from the HOA funds. Quietly. 4 years. Sarah blinked, trying to process the information. She's stealing. Not just that, Tom said, lowering his voice as if afraid someone might hear. She's been getting people to make donations under the guise of HOA fees. Only they're not for the neighborhood. They're for her. She's been pocketing the money, getting away with it, because no one has ever dared to question her. Sarah's stomach churned. How do you know all of this? Tom hesitated again. I've seen the paperwork. I've been keeping an eye on things for a while. And I'm not the only one who's noticed. A couple of other neighbors, people who've been here longer than me, they know about it too. But no one's brave enough to say anything. Karen's got them all afraid. Sarah's mind was spinning. How has she managed to get away with this for so long? Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Because, Tom said quietly, she knows everything. She's got people watching, making sure no one speaks out. Anyone who tries to confront her ends up dealing with a fine, a lawsuit, or worse, she gets them to sell their homes. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She's forcing people to leave their own homes? Tom nodded grimly. You don't fight Karen and win. It's always been like this. She's got the board wrapped around her finger. She's made sure they're all in on it. Anyone who resists her is pushed out, sometimes subtly, sometimes not so much. Sarah's head was spinning. This wasn't just a battle for her garden anymore. Karen wasn't just some overbearing neighbor. She was a manipulative, dangerous woman who would stop at nothing to maintain her control over the neighborhood. Sarah clenched her fists. What are we going to do about it? How do we stop her? Tom looked at her with a mixture of resignation and fear. I don't know if we can. Karen's got power, Sarah. More power than anyone here realizes. People are afraid to speak up. They're scared of what she'll do if they do. But if you keep fighting her, if you don't back down, she'll make sure you regret it. Sarah stood frozen, the weight of Tom's words pressing down on her. She had never imagined that a neighborhood could be so corrupt, so manipulated by one person. And now, she realized, her fight wasn't just against Karen's rules. It was against the very system that had allowed Karen to gain so much power in the first place. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The sharp sound cut through the silence, making both Sarah and Tom jump. Tom's eyes went wide with panic. It's her, he whispered urgently. You need to get rid of her. Now. Sarah's pulse raced. She turned toward the door, her mind racing. Was it Karen? Had she come to escalate things even further? Hide, Tom hissed. Don't let her see me. She can't know that I'm here. Before Sarah could respond, Tom darted into the hallway, slipping behind the kitchen wall just out of view. The knock came again, louder this time. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the door, steeling herself for whatever was about to happen. It was Karen. Her eyes were as cold as ever, her lips pressed into a tight line. We need to talk, she said, her voice clipped. About what? Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to sound calm. Karen stepped forward, her gaze flicking around the room. Her eyes narrowed when she noticed Tom's coat lying on the chair near the door, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. I'm here about the garden, Karen said, her voice cutting through the tension. I gave you a chance, Sarah. But I see you're still ignoring the rules. Sarah's heart skipped. Karen's voice was calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. This was no longer about flowers. It was about something much bigger. Karen, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the storm swirling inside her, I won't back down. You can't control me. Karen's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. We'll see about that, she said softly. You've made a mistake, Sarah. And now you're going to regret it. Chapter 5. The Breaking Point. The evening air was thick with tension as Sarah closed the door behind Karen. Her heart was still pounding from the confrontation, the threat hanging in the air like a cloud that wouldn't go away. Karen's words echoed in her mind. You're going to regret it. Regret what? Sarah thought as she walked back into the living room, her mind racing. She couldn't back down now. She wouldn't. But what was Karen really capable of? She had made it clear that this wasn't just about her garden anymore. It was about control. About breaking people. And Sarah was starting to feel the weight of it all. She turned toward the kitchen where Tom was hiding, still not sure if he was going to speak up or if he was just as frightened as she was. Sarah didn't have time for fear anymore. She needed answers. She needed to know if there was any way out of this. Tom, she called out, her voice tight. He emerged slowly from behind the wall, his face pale. What the hell is going on? Why is she acting like this? This isn't just about flowers. Tom looked at her, eyes filled with a mixture of concern and fear. Sarah, I told you. She's not just the HOA president. She controls everything. People have lost homes because of her. She plays dirty. She has connections. People she's bought off. Sarah clenched her fists, the frustration boiling over. She can't do this. Not to me. I'm not going to let her win. Not after everything I've worked for. Tom shook his head, a weary sigh escaping his lips. It's not that simple. She's got too many people on her side. You go up against Karen, and she will destroy you. I've seen it happen. I don't care, Sarah snapped, her voice cracking. I won't let her take my life away. I didn't buy this house to be controlled. I'm not backing down. Not now. Tom hesitated before speaking again. If you're serious about this, Sarah, you need to be careful. The next time she comes at you, it won't be flowers. It'll be something worse. Something that'll cost you. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? Tom glanced around the room, lowering his voice to a whisper. I don't know all the details, but I've heard things. People who've fought back. People who've resisted her, she's gone after them. Lawsuits, fines, even threat. She's made people sell their homes at a loss. She's ruined lives, Sarah. And she's done it all with the power of the HOA. A knot tightened in Sarah's chest. She had no idea it was this bad. She had thought it was just about the garden, about her property, but now she saw that Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a force of destruction. And Sarah was in her path. I don't care what she does, Sarah said, her voice shaking with determination. I'm not leaving. I'm not running. I didn't work this hard to just give up. Tom looked at her with sympathy, his face clouded with regret. I'm not saying you should give up, but you need to understand what you're up against. She doesn't stop. Ever. Just as Sarah opened her mouth to respond, there was a knock at the door. Her breath caught in her throat. Not again. Tom's face went pale. Hide, he whispered urgently. If it's Karen, she won't hesitate to use whatever she has on you. But Sarah wasn't hiding. Not anymore. She walked to the door and opened it, her heart pounding in her chest. Standing in front of her was not Karen, but a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark, intense eyes and a suit that looked far too expensive for this neighborhood. Can I help you? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The man gave her a polite smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm here on behalf of the HOA, he said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. I'm here to discuss the situation with your landscaping. Sarah's blood ran cold. Not again. You're here about the flowers? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded. There's a fine associated with non-compliance. You've already been warned, but it seems that you've ignored the HOA's request to remove the plants. I'm here to help you avoid further complications. Sarah's chest tightened. She knew what he meant. He was here to intimidate her, to enforce Karen's will. The weight of the situation pressed down on her like a vice. I'm not removing the flowers, Sarah said, standing her ground. I've already told Karen I won't. And I'm not going to keep backing down. The man's smile faltered slightly, and he stepped closer to her, lowering his voice. You're making a mistake, Sarah. You really don't want to go down this road. Karen doesn't like people who don't listen. I don't care what Karen likes, Sarah shot back, her voice growing stronger with each word. I'm not going to let her, or you, push me around. The man took a step back, his expression hardening. This isn't over, he said, his voice low. The HOA doesn't forget. We have ways of making people comply. I suggest you rethink your position before it gets worse for you. Without waiting for Sarah to respond, he turned and walked away, his steps echoing in the quiet evening. Sarah stood there, frozen for a moment. The door clicked shut behind her, and she turned to Tom, who was watching her with a mixture of fear and disbelief. What was that? Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Who was that guy? Tom's face was pale. That's one of Karen's people. The enforcers. He's part of the team that makes sure people comply with the rules. He's been sent to intimidate you. To make sure you understand what happens when you don't listen. Sarah's stomach churned. She felt the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. Karen wasn't playing games anymore. This wasn't just about rules. This was a fight for her life, and she was the one who had started it. But it was too late to turn back now. I'm not backing down, Sarah whispered to herself. I'll fight her. I have to. Chapter 6. The Alliance Forms. The night felt colder than usual, as though the very air around Sarah was thick with unease. She had been up for hours, pacing around the house, running through everything that had happened in the past few days. The warning from Karen. The man who had come to her door. The threats, the pressure, the fear, everything had started to snowball. What had she gotten herself into? She knew she couldn't keep fighting this alone. There had to be others who felt the same way she did, who had suffered under Karen's rule. There had to be a way to fight back, to expose Karen for who she truly was. But who could she trust? Could she even trust Tom, the only neighbor who had spoken up so far? Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from him. Meet me at the park. 10 p.m. I'm bringing someone who can help. Trust me. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. Tom hadn't given her any reason to doubt him, but something about the urgency in his words made her stomach tighten. Was this really the right move? Could she risk getting involved with even more people who were scared to take a stand? She didn't have much choice. There was no going back now. The park was quiet when she arrived, the streetlights casting long shadows over the empty benches and playground. Sarah felt the weight of the night press in around her. She looked around, scanning the area for Tom. He wasn't there yet. Minutes passed, each one making her feel more exposed, more vulnerable. She had been careful to avoid Karen's eyes all week, but now she felt like the whole neighborhood was watching her. She shivered, unsure if it was the cold air or the mounting pressure that made her feel this way. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Sarah jumped, startled. It was Tom, walking quickly toward her with a determined look on his face. Hey, he greeted her softly, glancing around nervously. You okay? I don't know, Sarah replied, her voice tight. What's going on, Tom? Who else are you bringing into this? Tom gave her a brief, reassuring smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. There's someone you need to meet. Someone who knows exactly how Karen worked. Someone who can help us take her down. Before Sarah could respond, another figure stepped out of the darkness. A woman. She was tall, with sharp eyes and a stern expression. Her clothes were simple, but there was a quiet confidence in the way she carried herself that caught Sarah's attention. "Sarah, this is Julie," Tom said. "She's lived here longer than anyone, and she's seen what Karen can do. She's had enough of it, just like you." Julie extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. I know things feel out of control right now, but I promise you, we can turn this around." Sarah hesitated for a moment before shaking Julie's hand. "I don't understand. Why are you getting involved now? Why didn't you speak up before?" Julie's face softened, and she glanced at Tom, who gave her a subtle nod. "Because we're all afraid. But it's gotten worse. Karen isn't just controlling the neighborhood. She's tearing people apart. She has power, but she doesn't have the whole community behind her. And that's where you come in." "I don't get it," Sarah said, her frustration growing. "What can I do? I'm just one person." "You're not just one person," Julie said firmly. "You're the spark we need. The moment you stood up to her, you showed everyone that Karen's power isn't invincible. It's time for people like us to stop hiding." Tom stepped in, his expression more serious now. "We've been afraid to take a stand. But Karen's done things to people that can't be ignored anymore. She's gotten away with it because no one has dared to challenge her. But you've shown them it's possible." Sarah's mind raced. "So what do we do now? How do we stop her?" Julie looked at her with a knowing look. "We expose her. But we need evidence. We need to show the whole neighborhood who she really is and what she's been doing with the HOA funds." Tom nodded. "We've all seen the signs. We just need to gather the proof and make it public. If enough people see the truth, Karen will lose her grip. The board will have no choice but to vote her out." Julie's words made sense, but a gnawing feeling settled in Sarah's stomach. Expose her? She wasn't sure if she was ready for the war that would follow. Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. But she had no choice. She couldn't let Karen destroy everything she had worked for. "I'm in," Sarah said, her voice steady now. "But we need to be careful. If Karen finds out what we're planning—" "Don't worry," Julie interrupted. "We've all been careful. But we're running out of time. It's now or never." The three of them stood in the park for a few more minutes, making plans and sharing stories. Sarah felt a small sense of relief. She wasn't alone anymore. But the weight of the task ahead still hung heavily on her. As they were about to part ways, Tom looked at Sarah with a serious expression. "Be careful, okay? If Karen finds out you're working with us, she'll make things even worse for you." "I'm ready for it," Sarah said, though her voice wavered. "I didn't come here to back down." Julie gave Sarah a long look, her eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "Just remember, this isn't just about you anymore. It's about the whole neighborhood." The three of them went their separate ways, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As she walked back to her house, the darkness felt heavier, the silence more oppressive. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. When she reached her front door, she noticed something strange. The gate to her backyard was open, just a crack. Her heart skipped a beat. Had someone been in her yard? She stepped cautiously toward the gate, her mind racing with possibilities. Could it have been Karen? One of her enforcers? Or was it just her imagination? The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, her hand gripping the gate. As she slowly pushed it open, she froze. There, lying on the ground, was a single, red rose. It wasn't just any rose. It was the same color as the flowers she had planted in her garden. Chapter 7: The Showdown. The next few days felt like a pressure cooker, and Sarah could feel the heat building. The rose left in her backyard had rattled her, but what scared her more was the feeling that Karen had crossed a line. This wasn't just about flowers or rules anymore. It was personal. And Sarah was starting to realize how far Karen was willing to go to keep her grip on this neighborhood. The worst part? She wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Tom, Julie, even the few neighbors who had expressed support, They all had reasons to be cautious. This wasn't just a fight with one woman. This was a battle against a system, a web of manipulation that stretched deeper than Sarah had ever imagined. The HOA meeting was scheduled for the following evening. Sarah had been planning to attend, but now, with the rose still lingering in her mind, she wasn't sure what she'd be walking into. She had to be careful. She couldn't afford to make a wrong move. She arrived at the community center early, the parking lot nearly empty. The building loomed ahead like a fortress, its cold, gray walls mirroring the tension building inside her chest. As Sarah made her way through the front doors, the faint murmur of voices could be heard from the meeting room. She could already feel the eyes on her. Every step she took felt like it echoed in the silent space around her. She walked into the room, trying to steady her nerves. The chairs were arranged in a circle, and a few familiar faces turned to look at her. Tom and Julie were already there, sitting near the back, their eyes briefly meeting hers in silent acknowledgement. Karen was at the front of the room, as always, holding court with the rest of the board members. Her sharp eyes flickered over Sarah as she entered, but she didn't say a word. It was as if the tension between them was thick enough to slice with a knife. Sarah sat down beside Julie, her heart racing. It felt like the calm before the storm. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. If she wasn't careful, if she didn't play this right, Karen would tear her apart. The meeting started, and for the first few minutes, it was business as usual. Property values, lawn maintenance, guidelines for mailbox colors. It felt like a bad joke. All of it, from the forced smiles to the rehearsed speeches, was designed to create an illusion of peace, of harmony, when underneath it all, Sarah knew the truth. This neighborhood wasn't about community. It was about control. And Karen was the queen. Next on the agenda, Karen's voice rang out, cool and calculated, "We need to address recent violations of HOA rules." Her eyes slid toward Sarah. Specifically, the unapproved landscaping in 317 Oakwood. Sarah's chest tightened, and she braced herself for the inevitable. This was the moment she had been dreading, but she refused to show any sign of weakness. Karen continued, her tone sharper now. "As you all know, this violation was brought to my attention, and I have already given the homeowner a fair warning. However, the flowers remain. And so, we must discuss the next steps." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her voice steady. "I've already said I'm not removing them. I'm not breaking any rules. This is my property, and I'll do what I want with it." There was a sharp intake of breath from the others in the room. Sarah could feel the weight of their stares, but she refused to back down. This wasn't just about flowers anymore. It was about standing her ground. Karen's lips twitched into a thin, humorless smile. "You're making a mistake, Sarah. The rules are clear. Everyone follows them. That's how we keep the community's integrity intact. You're the one who's choosing to make this personal." "It's personal now," Sarah shot back. "But not because of me. You've made it personal from the start. These rules? They're just a way for you to control people." The room went silent. Sarah's pulse quickened. She could feel the eyes of the board members on her, judging her, waiting for her to crack. But she didn't. Karen stood up slowly, the movement graceful yet full of menace. She walked toward Sarah, her heels clicking sharply against the floor with every step. "Do you know what happens to people who don't respect the rules?" she asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Sarah stood too, meeting her gaze with a challenge in her eyes. "I know what happens to people who let others control their lives," she said, her voice calm but firm. Karen didn't flinch, but there was something darker in her eyes now. Something colder. "You have no idea what you're up against." With that, Karen turned to face the rest of the room. "I'm afraid we can't let this go any longer," she said, her voice rising to address the entire group. "We must impose a fine. And if the homeowner continues to ignore the rules, further action will be taken." Sarah's stomach churned. She knew it wasn't just about the flowers anymore. This was about Karen sending a message. A warning to anyone else who might think about challenging her. Tom leaned in toward Sarah, his voice a quiet whisper. She's not going to stop. We need to do something now, before it gets worse. But Sarah wasn't listening to him anymore. Her gaze was locked on Karen, who was speaking with the board members now, a sense of victory in her posture. Karen had already won in her mind. But Sarah wasn't finished yet. "I'm not paying the fine," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the conversation like a blade. The room went deathly silent. Everyone turned to look at her, their expressions a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, refusing to be intimidated. "You can fine me all you want. But I'm not backing down," she said, her eyes never leaving Karen's. For a moment Karen said nothing. She simply stared at Sarah, her lips curling into a small, unsettling smile. "We'll see about that," she said quietly. And with that, the meeting came to an end. As Sarah made her way out of the room, she felt her pulse still racing. She had just made a powerful enemy, but it felt right. She wasn't backing down, not this time. But as she stepped out into the parking lot, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, her hands trembling as she read the message. "We know what you're planning. Don't push us any further." Her breath caught in her throat. The message was from an unknown number. Chapter 8. The Counterattack. The morning after the HOA meeting, Sarah felt like a different person. She was awake before the sun had even fully risen, pacing her living room with a mix of anticipation and dread. The message from the unknown number kept flashing in her mind. "We know what you're planning. Don't push us any further." Her hands had shaken when she read it, and now, as the silence of the early hours pressed in, she realized that the war she had stepped into wasn't just with Karen, it was with a system, a network of people who weren't afraid to fight dirty. Her mind raced. Who had sent the message? Was it Karen's doing? Or was there someone else, someone even more dangerous, lurking in the shadows? The knocking at her door jolted her from her thoughts. She knew who it was before she even opened it. She didn't need to look through the peephole. "Tom," she said, opening the door to see him standing there, looking anxious. His eyes flicked around nervously, as if he was expecting someone to jump out of the bushes. "Can we talk?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for her to reply. "Of course," Sarah replied, shutting the door behind him. She watched as he ran a hand through his hair, clearly agitated. "Sarah, we need to talk about last night," he began. "You made a huge statement at that meeting. I get it, you're frustrated, but you don't know how far Karen is willing to go. She won't just let this slide." "I know," Sarah said quietly, her hands trembling slightly. "But I couldn't just sit there and let her win. I'm done being scared of her." Tom gave her a hard look, clearly torn. "It's not just Karen anymore. It's the whole HOA. They won't stop. They'll do whatever it takes to crush you. I've seen it happen before. And I'm supposed to just sit here and wait for them to come after me?" Sarah shot back. "I'm not doing that, Tom. I'm fighting back. I will fight back." Tom sighed, running his hand through his hair again, looking defeated. "I get it. I do. But there's a way to fight, and then there's pushing her into a corner. Once you do that, she'll strike harder than you can imagine." Sarah's heart raced at the thought of Karen going after her again. But she couldn't let fear control her anymore. "We need to gather evidence," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We need to expose her, Tom. We have to show the whole neighborhood what she's been doing." "I agree," Tom said, but he still looked uneasy. "But we're not just dealing with Karen's wrath. We're dealing with the entire HOA. The board is full of people who've been bought off. If we make a move, they'll destroy us." "I can't just back down," Sarah said, her voice trembling with frustration. "I won't. I didn't buy this house to be bullied." Tom's expression softened, but there was still worry in his eyes. "Okay. I'll help you, but we have to be careful. No one can know what we're planning. If Karen gets wind of this, it'll be the end of us." "I don't care," Sarah said, her voice trembling with determination. "I have to do this." She knew he was right. She needed evidence. She needed something concrete, something that would shake the foundation of Karen's carefully constructed empire. But how? Tom seemed to read her mind. I have an idea, he said. I know someone who might be able to help us. Who? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. Another one of your neighbors? No. Someone from the inside, Tom said quietly. Someone who works with the HOA. They're not happy with what Karen's doing either, but they've been too scared to speak up. A flicker of hope sparked in Sarah's chest. You're sure we can trust them? Tom nodded. I've known him for years. He's a good guy. But like I said, we have to keep this quiet. If Karen finds out, we're all screwed. They spent the next few hours making plans. Tom would meet with his contact the following evening, someone who might have access to the HOA's internal documents, files, emails, records that could prove Karen's corruption. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the day dragged on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she looked out the window, it felt like someone was standing in the shadows, waiting. The quiet of the neighborhood felt suffocating. She hadn't realized how much she had come to rely on the peace and anonymity of her new home, until it was ripped away. That evening, as she sat on the porch with her coffee, she saw a familiar face across the street. Karen. Standing at the edge of her yard, looking directly at Sarah's house. It wasn't subtle. It was as if she was daring Sarah to do something. The hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stood up. She couldn't be sure, but it felt like Karen knew. Knew what? Sarah wondered. Was it possible that Karen had found out about their plan? Was she watching for a reason? The silence that followed felt suffocating. Karen didn't move, just stood there, her eyes locked on Sarah's house. And for the first time since she had moved in, Sarah felt exposed. Karen finally turned and walked back toward her house, but Sarah didn't breathe easily until she was sure Karen had gone inside. It wasn't just paranoia. Sarah knew that Karen wasn't the type to wait for someone else to make the first move. She was a predator, and Sarah had just shown her that she was a threat. Later that night, Tom texted her. Meeting at midnight. Be careful. Sarah's nerves flared again, but she knew she had no choice. This was her only chance. She had to go to the meeting. She had to confront this head-on. When midnight came, Sarah slipped out the door, her heart racing. The streets were empty, silent, save for the sound of her footsteps echoing in the stillness. She reached the agreed-upon spot, a small, quiet park at the edge of the neighborhood. Tom was already there, pacing in the dark. Are you ready? He asked, his voice tight. I don't have a choice, Sarah said. Let's do this. They waited for a few minutes, the silence hanging heavy between them. Then, from the shadows, a figure approached. A man. He was tall, his face obscured by the darkness, but Sarah could feel the tension in the air. As he stepped closer, his features became clearer. It was the man from the HOA. The one who had threatened her at her door. He smiled coldly. I told you, he said quietly, you don't know what you're getting into. Chapter 9. The Shocking Revelation. The following day felt like a heavy storm was looming, just waiting to break. Sarah couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her chest since the meeting with the man from the HOA. His words echoed in her mind. You're fighting more than just Karen. There are powerful people involved. People who have a lot to lose if you keep pushing. She tried to focus, tried to go through the motions of daily life, but everything felt different now. It wasn't just about flowers or rules anymore. It was about a battle for her home, her freedom. And the enemy wasn't just Karen. It was a system, an entire network of control. She sat on her couch, staring at the phone in her hand. Tom had texted her earlier that morning, reminding her about the meeting later tonight. Be careful, he had written. It's more than you think. And you need to be ready. Sarah rubbed her temples, the weight of the situation making her feel like she was carrying the weight of the world. She wasn't ready, not in the way Tom meant. But she had no choice. She couldn't back down now. The clock ticked slowly, the minutes dragging on until the time came to head to the meeting. Her nerves were on edge, every step she took toward the community center feeling like it might be her last chance to turn back. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. As she arrived at the community center, she noticed the parking lot was fuller than usual. Cars were lined up in neat rows, people milling about, talking quietly in small groups. She glanced at her phone again, her heart pounding. Tom was already inside, but he hadn't sent any more texts since his last one. She pulled open the door, and the buzz of voices filled the air. It wasn't a typical HOA meeting. There were more people here, more tension, more whispers. The air felt thick with something that wasn't just about property values. She spotted Tom in the back corner of the room, talking to a few other neighbors she recognized. Julie was with him, looking just as anxious as Sarah felt. Sarah walked over to them, her feet heavy as she moved through the crowd. Tom looked up as she approached, his face tense. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice tight. "I don't think I have a choice," Sarah replied, glancing around. "But why does this feel different? What's going on?" Julie leaned in, lowering her voice. "This isn't just about the flowers anymore. It's bigger. The man who spoke to you last night, he wasn't just a random enforcer. He's part of something much deeper." Sarah frowned, her stomach twisting. "What do you mean?" Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. "Karen's been working with powerful people for years. The board members, the wealthy landowners in this neighborhood, they all know what's going on. They've all been getting a cut of the HOA funds. They've been using the system to control everyone. They want to keep it quiet, keep people in line." Julie nodded. "And now they're scared. You've exposed something. They don't want anyone knowing the truth." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't realized how deep the corruption ran, how many people were involved in this twisted game. She had thought it was just Karen. But now she saw the bigger picture. Karen wasn't just a petty dictator, she was part of a much larger scheme. The meeting began, and the room quieted. Karen stood at the front, her eyes scanning the room with cold authority. Her presence seemed to command the space, and Sarah could feel her gaze flicker over her as she took her seat. "Tonight's meeting is crucial," Karen said, her voice carrying through the room. "We have a number of issues to address. The future of this neighborhood is at stake, and we need to make sure that everyone here follows the rules." Her words sounded rehearsed, but the coldness behind them was unmistakable. Sarah's stomach churned. The rules weren't just about property values, they were about control, and Karen was the one holding all the cards. "Let's start with the landscaping violations," Karen continued, her eyes briefly landing on Sarah. "We've had complaints about properties that have made unauthorized changes to their gardens. As I've said before, we cannot allow people to make changes without approval. It ruins the aesthetic of the entire community." Sarah felt her blood boil. She wasn't just fighting for her garden anymore. She was fighting for every person in this room, every neighbor who had been too afraid to speak up. "I'll not let you get away with this, Karen," Sarah muttered under her breath, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. Tom leaned in, whispering urgently, "Don't do it now, Sarah. Not in front of everyone." But Sarah couldn't sit back anymore. She couldn't let Karen keep pushing people around, pretending like she had the right to control everything. "I won't back down," Sarah said, more to herself than anyone else. "I can't." Before she could stop herself, she stood up, her voice cutting through the room. "This isn't about flowers, Karen. It's about power. And it's about time we expose what's really going on here." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Sarah, and Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a tight, controlled smile. "You think you can just come in here and disrupt everything?" Karen's voice was cold, but there was a tremor of anger underneath. "You have no idea what you're up against." "I know exactly what I'm up against," Sarah replied, her voice shaking with both fear and defiance. "You've been using the HOA to line your pockets, to control people, to destroy lives. And I won't stand for it anymore." A murmur ran through the room, but Karen didn't flinch. She straightened up, her gaze icy. "You don't know what you're asking for," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "The people in this room don't want the truth to come out. They don't want to risk losing everything. And if you keep pushing, Sarah, you'll lose everything too." Sarah felt a chill wash over her. She knew Karen wasn't just threatening her, she was warning her. The room had turned against her, and the weight of everyone's fear was crushing. Karen's gaze flickered toward the back of the room, and Sarah saw a man standing in the shadows. He was tall, his features hidden in the dark, but there was something about him that made Sarah's blood run cold. Who was he? Before she could ask, the man stepped forward, his voice carrying across the room. "Karen is right," he said, his voice deep and authoritative. "This isn't just about one person. It's about all of us. And if Sarah wants to expose the truth, she better be prepared to face the consequences." The man's eyes locked with Sarah's, and she felt a jolt of recognition. It was him, the enforcer. The one who had threatened her. Chapter 10: The Twist of Fate. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every eye was on Sarah, the silence deafening as Karen stood at the front, her eyes flashing with anger. The man who had stepped forward, the enforcer, stood just behind her, his presence looming like a dark cloud. His cold gaze never left Sarah, his every movement calculating. For a moment, Sarah's thoughts raced, but she knew this was it. She couldn't back down. Not now. "Do you think you're the first person to try and stand up to me?" Karen's voice was steady, but the venom behind it was clear. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." Sarah's chest tightened, but she met Karen's gaze with as much defiance as she could muster. "I don't care what you've done to others. I'm not afraid of you anymore." Karen's lips curled into a thin smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You should be." The man standing behind her stepped forward, his voice deep and calm. "You don't understand, Sarah. This isn't just about rules. This is bigger than you. Bigger than all of us." Sarah's heart skipped. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man's eyes flickered with something, pity, maybe? Or amusement. "My name is Michael. I work for Karen. And I'm here to make sure you understand the gravity of your actions." "Why are you helping her?" Sarah asked, the words coming out sharper than she intended. "She's been abusing her power for years. She's been hurting people." Michael's expression darkened and he stepped closer, his voice low. "Karen's not the problem. She's just the face of it. The people behind her. They've built this neighborhood into what it is, and they don't take kindly to threats. You want to expose the truth? Fine. But be prepared for what comes next." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Who are these people?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this? For money? For power?" Michael didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at Karen, who was watching the exchange with a look of quiet satisfaction, like she knew the final blow was coming. He looked back at Sarah, his eyes hard. "You don't understand, Sarah. The people who control this neighborhood, they've been doing it for a long time. They have influence, connections, and if you keep pushing, they'll make sure you regret it." Sarah felt her hands tremble. "I'm not going to back down. I'm not afraid of you." "You should be," Michael said coldly. "You're playing a dangerous game and you've just tipped your hand. You've shown everyone what you're capable of, and now they're watching. They're waiting for you to make the next move. What are you going to do? Kill me?" Sarah's voice cracked, but she couldn't stop herself from saying the words. Michael's lips twitched into a small, humorless smile. "No. We don't kill people, Sarah. We destroy them slowly. We make them lose everything they care about. Their homes, their families, their peace of mind. It's not about taking you out in one swift blow. It's about breaking you down, piece by piece." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She had known it would be bad. She had known that Karen and her allies would stop at nothing to maintain control. But hearing it spoken out loud, made it all the more real. And terrifying. You think I'm going to let you do that? Sarah's voice was hoarse, but her anger pushed her forward. You're wrong. You're not going to break me. I'll expose you. All of you. Karen's eyes flashed with irritation. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about you. It's not even about the HOA. It's about power. We've worked too hard to let one rebellious homeowner ruin everything. The room was silent as Sarah processed the weight of Karen's words. This was bigger than her garden, bigger than her house. This was about control. About a network of people who had built their empire on fear and manipulation. And Sarah had become the target. The air in the room seemed to thicken, and Sarah felt herself growing dizzy with the realization of just how far Karen and her allies would go to keep their secrets buried. Enough, Michael said suddenly, his voice calm but final. You've had your say, Sarah. But you're going to have to live with the consequences. You're not just fighting Karen. You're fighting us all. With those final words, he turned on his heel, heading toward the door. Karen followed, her footsteps echoing in the silent room. Just as the door swung closed behind them, Sarah felt a hand on her shoulder. She spun around, her heart racing, but it was only Tom, standing behind her with a worried expression on his face. Are you okay? He asked quietly, his voice full of concern. Sarah didn't answer right away. Her mind was still reeling from the confrontation, from everything Michael had said. I don't know, Tom, she said finally, her voice shaking. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Tom's expression softened, and he pulled her into a tight hug. You don't have to do this alone. I'm with you. We're in this together. For a moment, Sarah let herself lean into the comfort of his embrace. But the weight of what was happening, the danger, the lies, the corruption, hung over her like a storm cloud she couldn't outrun. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the moment. She pulled it out quickly, her heart skipping a beat as she saw the message. You don't know what you're up against, Sarah. If you keep pushing, you'll regret it. I'm watching you. The message was from the same unknown number. Her stomach twisted. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. If you love watching my video, then make sure to subscribe and like my video.